Hi, and welcome to our conversation today around guilt. Maybe not your favorite topic to talk about, but I want you to fill in the blank today. Do you feel guilty when what makes that feeling of guilt come up? I'll share two common things that I hear from clients that makes that feeling of guilt come up. One is when they want to take time off work and they feel guilty for doing that. And two, when they work too much and they feel guilty for not being home with their family. Okay. Let's take a little bit deeper look at guilt. What is guilt? One could say that guilt is our inner radar that tells us when we've done something wrong. And let's take that a little bit further to say that guilt, there are two types of guilt. One is true remorse or guilt when we've legitimately done something to harm someone else, whether that was intentional or unintentional due to our own kind of unconsciousness. Then there is a reason for us to feel guilt or remorse, which again is a messenger to us that our actions, there was something wrong with our actions. Now, there's another form of guilt that is the more commonly experienced form of guilt, and it is what I call non-legitimate guilt. That is when we feel guilty for doing something, but we've not done anything wrong. So genuinely, there's not a need for us to feel guilty. Guilty is not a legitimate feeling in that circumstance. So what causes the two different types of feelings? This has to do with our authenticity and how in alignment our actions are with who we are at our core. So that kind of most purest self that you are at your core, which is that authentic part of you. When we do things out of alignment with that, that's when we can tend to get that messenger of guilt. Now, the gap, let's add another layer on this. We have a lot of standards and expectations in our jobs, our cultures, and our societies that create artificial rules for us. And if we're not careful, we can experience guilt, the non-legitimate form of guilt, when we do something in contradiction to that rule or belief that is not necessarily a true standard of what's good for you or not good for you, like your inner self is, but it's an artificial standard created by someone, either your workplace or the government or maybe it's a long-standing belief from earlier in your life. Now, for example, do you ever feel guilty if you don't work an 8-hour day? Legitimately, sometimes I have felt guilty as an entrepreneur if I didn't work an 8-hour day, even if I only had 6 hours of work to do. And isn't that the reason we want to be in entrepreneurship, right? Is because we can own our own time. But I've caught myself feeling guilty for not working an 8-hour day. But who says we're supposed to work an 8-hour day? I came across an interesting article today that talks about how the 8-hour day became a standard in the US back in the 1940s and 50s to contradict some very, very unhealthy practices that were happening in the workplace. And so it's interesting how that prior to that time was not a standard that anyone used to measure. If you lived in another country, you also might have a different standard of measurement for what is culturally accepted as the right number of hours to work. Now, that is where we really get into trouble, is when we start measuring ourselves and our behavior automatically to standards that were created by somebody else. And that can cause this gap of, for example, we were talking about feeling guilty if you wanted to take a day off of work. So some limiting, some beliefs and cultural things that really play into that create guilt in that gap is this idea that productivity is more important, is the most important thing. Productivity is more important. Getting things done. We don't even know what it is we're trying to get done, but getting things done is more important than balance, health, and well-being. Gratefully, we're seeing a shift back in a much more authentic way to this, but there are many, many people today who still feel guilty if they're taking a day off of work to take care of their own needs, even when they legitimately have vacation time to take off and all of these things. So if that is you, I want you to begin to ask yourself, why am I operating according to these standards that were arbitrarily set by someone? And is that the standard I really want to be operating by? Because I'm going to encourage you that connecting back to your own true needs and desires and wants as a human being, your own energy level, your own inspiration level as a human being, is a much better gauge to make decisions by. And when we're honoring that, we don't need to experience guilt of not following a arbitrarily set standard, because we can recognize that that arbitrarily set standard is just a guide that was put in place to really try to encourage some standardization. Doesn't mean for you today, if you've already worked or you've not worked, that that's the guide that you need to measure yourself by today. Instead, check in. See, what is your energy? What is your level of work that would serve you today? And if you need to take a day off, then take a day off. And don't feel guilty about that. You deserve that. Now, let's go to another form of guilt, which is feeling guilty when you've worked too much or you are working too much, that you are missing out on time with your family. This form of guilt is a little bit more legitimate guilt, because where does it come from? Most likely it comes from that deep kind of inner desire or core to be having more quality time and space with our family. And if our behavior is out of whack with what is really true and authentic for us, then again, we open up that gap where guilt can slip in. Now, the problem comes when we feel that, but we don't take any action to change it. And if we're sensing that, we just have to begin to think that guilt is a messenger. And what is it telling us? And in this case, it's probably telling you that you really would like more quality time with your family. And so that means taking a look at how your work life has gotten out of balance with a more authentic value of quality time with your family. And then it's about making choices to bring that more into balance. So you can see in both situations, guilt is a messenger. It's just, are we measuring by what's in here, or are we measuring by the standards of other people, culture, government, laws, regulations? And so the answer in both ways is to take the monkey of guilt off your back and think about, from these two examples I've given you, how would you let the illegitimate feeling of guilt go? And then when you do feel that more legitimate feeling of guilt, how would you take action to align your authentic behavior to your internal wisdom and guidance system? So I'd love to know what you learned from this today. What's here that's new for you today? And what would you like to explore deeper around this conversation? I'm Vicki Haddock, authentic leadership coach and author, and I'm here to help you connect more with your inner self and live according to the values and things that are genuine and true for you, and to kind of burst those illusions or the ways that we have felt like we have to conform to all these things outside of us that can cause us so much pain and suffering. So, all right, I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Be well.